Hey, this is a podcast from Occupy Radio on Student Radio in Bergen. Please feel free to leave your feedback and comments on our Facebook page, Occupy Radio Norway.
This is Occupy Radio with Anthony
and Mr. Paulie.
Hello world, and thank you for tuning in, streaming or downloading this show number 11 of Occupy Radio. And I am joined by my fellow occupants, the most admirable Anthony Hill.
Hello.
And the respectable and resourceful Rune Storetvedt from the Occupy movement. Hi Rune, how you doing?
Hello.
And we are, of course, sitting in the studios of Student Radio here, or Student Radio here in Bergen, Norway. And Anthony, I believe as usual, you have a quote for us.
I have. The last few weeks we played a quote, but I've got one to say this week by somebody. Can I have a little quizzy thing with you just before we do it?
Quizzy.
It's by one of my favourite people in the world. His nickname was Bapu, and he was. Okay, I'm trying to give you hints here. He was shot at nearly point blank range in 1948.
Yes, okay. Was there a film, big film about him, directed by Richard Attenborough?
Correct.
Hey, well, it
Who
must
are we
be
talking about?
Mahatma Coat.
Mahatma Gandhi,
No,
Mohandas
Mahatma
Gandhi.
Gandhi, yes.
And did you know, actually, that film
His name is not Mahatma, by the way.
No, it's Mohandas.
It's Mohandas, yeah.
That film holds the record for the most people used in a film. The final scene with the funeral, it was 300,000 people.
Wow.
They used, yeah.
Jeez. Imagine getting all those extras together and giving them, excuse me, can you please move over a bit? Yeah, that would have been about.
Anyway, the quote goes...
Yes.
The world can provide enough to satisfy every man's need, but not every man's greed. That's it.
Yes, Mohandas Bapu Gandhi. I'm coming back with a quote, as usual.
Yeah, do that.
Imelda Marcos, another great humanitarian. Yes. When responding to claims she had 3,000 pairs of shoes, she answered indignantly, I don't have 3,000 pairs of shoes. I have 1,060.
There we go.
Yeah, okay. So,
yes, listeners, you may have gathered by our quotes today that our show today is going to be about consumerism. And I'm sure Mr. Paulie has an appropriate song to kick off or to finish this little segment and to kick off the next segment.
Definitely. Let's get off to a consumeristic kick-off with The Jam. Great band from the 80s with a song called, appropriately enough, Shopping. That's The Jam with Shopping, and you are listening to Occupy Radio on Student Radio in Bergen, which you can stream on Fridays at 12:30 CET. What's that, Anthony? CET?
Central European Time.
Indeed it is, and that's at srib.no. And should you wish to download this podcast, interact with the boys, or put forward your opinion, you just have to go to our Facebook page, which is called Occupy Radio Norway, or you can even go to our YouTube page of the same name.
And now, it's time for Who Would Have Thunk It?
Where Anthony Hill gives us some unthinkable headlines. What have you got in store for us today? In store, by the way, for us today.
I have a bit of a mixed bunch for you today, Mr. Paulie and Runa. The first one, it's coming off the back of the US elections. The headline is, Charles Darwin gets 4,000 votes in the American election.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah,
That sounds rather unthinkable since he's been dead for how many years now?
Yeah. That's real survival of the fittest stuff.
It is. The English biologist was the object of a grassroots write-in campaign in a county in the southern U.S. state of Georgia, according to the county newspaper. The only name officially on the ballot there was that of the incumbent Paul Brown. I think you pronounce that Brown or Brune or something. He's a Republican congressman and a strident Tea Partier.
I wonder if he's a strident tea bagger as well.
Yeah, he could be, you know. But do we all know, the listeners, do you think the listeners know what the Tea Party stands for? They're rather very right-wing party of the USA.
Yeah, going back to the politics of the 1600s, I guess.
Yes.
You can Google that if you want.
Yeah, anyway, Tea Party, yes. But anyway, he also believes in creationism, the movement that declares God literally created the world in 7 days. During the campaign, the election campaign, Mr. Brown declared that evolution amounted to lies straight from the pit of hell. Was that a good accent?
It was not too bad.
Thanks. Anyway, this remark prompted the University of Georgia biologist Jim Liebens-Mack to launch a Facebook page calling for Darwin for Congress and asking voters to send a message to Paul Brown and his college. And Mr. Pauly, oh my God.
Go on.
There's something even more unthinkable. What Mr. Brown, the creationist who believes that God created the world in 7 days, is the chairman of the Congressional Oversight Committee. Wait for it.
No.
Science, Space and Technology. And he's also educated as a doctor.
Wow. Think of the dilemmas he'd be going through every day of his life.
Think of all the crap that would be spoken about or how much they would get achieved at their congressional meetings. Anyway, next headline. Pakistani, this is a lot more serious than that one. In fact, this may bring tears to the eyes of some listeners. Pakistani couple kill their 15-year-old daughter for looking at a boy. And it is exactly the way it reads. A couple arrested in Pakistan for killing their 15-year-old daughter with acid say that they carried out the attack because she looked at a boy. The girl's father told the BBC that they feared she would bring dishonour on their family. Her mother said it was her destiny to die that way. There was a boy who came by on a motorcycle. She turned to look at him twice. I told her before not to do that. It's wrong. Anusha, the girl's name, Anusha's father is reported to have taken his daughter inside and beaten her, and then acid was poured all over her with the help of the wife. Officials say that the couple did not take their daughter to the hospital until the following morning. The couple say that an older daughter had already disgraced the family and they did not want to be dishonoured again. The Human Rights Commission, listeners out there, of Pakistan reported 943 women died in so-called honour killings last year, which represented an increase of more than 100 from 2010.
And there's been a couple of high-profile cases in Western countries recently as well, which are worth looking at as well.
So there we go. On to something not quite as extreme or morbid as that, but something which is quite serious. The headline is 12,000 less milk farmers in Norway. And in previous shows, we've spoken about the need to get away from corporate mass food production back to the community, but statistics show that it's heading in the wrong direction, with 12,000 milk farmers walking off their farms in the last 12 years. The Norwegian Farmers Association spokesperson Merete Furubjerg said that the main reason for this is that it's just not profitable for the amount of hours needed in production, and the welfare benefits, including holidays and time off, is nearly non-existent. Runa, I'm sure you are aching to comment on this. I mean, why should farmers slog away on their farms when they can earn more money for less work working in the city?
Well, I think that's a very simplistic explanation of it. It's a bit more complicated, and I don't want to take everything, but we've touched upon it in the show where we talked about food, and that is the rise of industrial monoculture, because Norway is traditionally a country where every small farmer could earn a living by having a cow and 2 sheep up in the hillsides and the mountains. So this is what has been happening for the last 30 or 40 years.
Trying to keep prices of milk down. At the same time, keep it affordable for the consumers.
Yeah, I think the big problem here is actually making profit for the big
corporations.
Big corporations like Tina, for instance. Norway also gives a lot of subsidies to have this kind of system where we produce our own stuff, but with a certain competitive pricing, so we can compete with international markets.
Yes. Well, if listeners want to know more about that kind of thing, we delved a lot deeper into it, into our show on food. Is any of the boys here, do you know the number of that show? Was it show number 4 or something? I think it was show
number 5.
Number 4 or 5, yeah, anyway. You can find it on YouTube or Facebook, as Paulie mentioned earlier. That's it for Unthinkable Headlines, Mr. Paul.
Thank you, Anthony. Let's stick to post-punk England, I guess in the late 70s, with The Clash, appropriately named Lost in the Supermarket.
Oh, yes, it's Friday afternoon again, and you're on student radio here in Bergen. It's Occupy Radio with Anthony and Mr. Paulie and our panellist, Runa. And today we're talking about consumerism. I forgot to mention that song, Mr. Paulie. That's Lost in the Supermarket by The Clash.
Yeah. Indeed.
Consumerism. Yes, Mr. Paulie, do you get a nice, warm, fuzzy feeling when you buy a new item of clothing or something?
I believe they call it retail therapy. Well, it depends how you're feeling at the time.
I didn't know that it had a name.
Yeah, well, I think so. I think that's the case. You know, especially if you're feeling a little bit down, you go, "Oh, what can I do?" Instead of doing something good for yourself, you go out and buy shit.
And it gives you that feeling. It doesn't last long, though.
No, it's a quick fix. But it's it's like go to IKEA, just get some more tea candles.
Yeah.
Buy some meatballs.
You get that feeling, and it's I actually have an inherent hatred of the act of shopping in itself.
Really?
That goes back to my childhood, Mr. Paulie, and we won't delve into it here. Maybe you and I can have a chat over a beer about it one day, and you can help me get it all out. But anyway, I bit the bullet on Saturday, Mr. Paulie, and I went to IKEA and I spent over 8,000 kroner.
Jeez, talking to that Swedish man.
I tried hard to find many of the things I needed online and to be responsible about it. And I actually have bought quite a bit of stuff from the second-hand shop since I moved in. But some stuff you just can't find. And anyway, we need stuff. I get this regular urge to buy things, and if I have the money, I'll just go and buy it. And where is the problem in people going off to buy things they want, Runa?
The act of buying is in principle just a transaction. And I think your question is people usually end up seeing it in that way, but I think it's a failure of our society to question this connection on either side of such a transaction. So if we start off by scrutinizing the consumer, it should be fairly easy to understand that we in the Western world buy a lot of stuff we just don't need. And in some cases that need is for very short amounts of time. And the facts on overconsumption are staggering. And it shows that we simply don't have enough planets to actually sustain our culture of material worship.
Guilty. I feel very guilty anyway. There is indeed very little I use every day, and most of it I could probably go without. But the practical side of it makes it all seem like necessities at the time, I buy them. I've noticed I have this little voice inside my head that helps me justify extravagant purchases and will sometimes even help me with creative budgeting. Yes, actually, to get to use the thing I bought, I realise I couldn't have gone without these things afterwards. But are you sure this is the right place to start this discussion, Runa?
Yeah. Yeah, I think it is because I think we need to review our way of looking at what we buy, how we use stuff, and how we take care of it, and consequently how we dispose of it. Just look at the way we treat clothes here in Norway. We buy them relatively cheap. Most of us never fix holes or make patches, and if it happens, we just throw it in the garbage bin. So what happens after that is it gets composted or incinerated at the closest garbage processing plant.
Some people even buy clothes with holes in them, ready-made and patches, just to make it
Yeah.
make them
New.
look old.
Yeah. They do, but it still ends up in the garbage
Eventually.
pretty quick.
Clothes recycling is pretty normal, though, isn't it?
Yeah, it has been for years, like charities or fabric recycling facilities, but the total amount of recycling is still far off from making the clothes industry an environmentally sustainable business. The European Union estimates that 25% recycling of clothes, while the US is at 15%. And this doesn't just mean that we're throwing them away, but we're also expending resources in quite large quantities, specifically oil and cotton.
Yeah, it's easy to forget that synthetic textiles are actually made out of oil. How do you propose we as consumers can go about changing our purchasing habits?
On a personal level, I think we need to be more conscious of our decisions to buy. We can perhaps divide our purchases into 3 levels. Firstly, those we do out of necessity, like food, electricity, medicine, hygiene. And secondly, those we buy out of practical reasons, tools, utilities, services, eating out. And thirdly, those we buy out of social reasons, like entertainment or identity or status. So finding this balance between those 3 can help us to better manage our household economy while we still manage to have good, meaningful lives without feeling like left out.
Yeah, outcast.
However, I do believe that the real effect on changing this will start to show when we learn to organize in collaborative consumption.
Yeah, I've heard about those examples of that, like couch surfing, and would you call couch surfing or car sharing collaborative?
Yeah, they are, and it's just two of those, and because the main philosophy in collaborative consumption is that you don't need to own what you use, and you don't always use what you own. Maybe it's a bit like neighbors that sort of lend to each other.
Yeah,
but this could be done in a much more organized and bigger way. So sharing access and availability to resources, it maximizes the usefulness of each product. And there are now several business startups which are focused on this kind of consumption. But it still remains to be seen how this can be realized on a large scale in society.
Yeah, you're Mr. Paulie's part of the car ring, aren't you? That works pretty well, doesn't
in Norwegian it's called Bilringen or Bildelringen, and it's there's approximately 80 cars throughout Bergen. You book it online, you pay per kilometer, and it's a very good system. And it's owned as everybody owns it in a way.
Yeah, and we have a collaborative thing as well. Like you buy food and I eat it. Because you live just upstai's from me, so I go up and help myself to stuff from your fridge, and it works out really well, actually.
I don't know what to say now.
Yeah. Anyway, seeing as we're promoting local communities, wouldn't it make sense to put this kind of thinking into practice in a place where people know each other?
Yeah, it does.
Like me and Paulie, for example.
Yeah, but like if we try to put this into a more kind of theoretical way, the idea of owning what you use is all about security and easy access. So in a local community, as in your house, you can provide both and can ideally be made to care for each other's needs as an extended family. And what can be seen on some island communities here in Norway is that people leave the car keys in the ignition when they park in case someone else needs a ride.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And bikes in Denmark and bikes in Amsterdam, I guess. A little bit of
They also have the same. But you know, the challenge of translating this to this. Local communities in a city, it makes for stricter rules, but it should still be rather straightforward. And another interesting aspect of the principle of providing for the community is that it opens up possibilities for creating businesses owned and run by its participants, like the Bildelring.
Yeah, speaking of this kind of thing, we should promote the documentary. It's a fantastic documentary, or series of short documentaries called The Story of Stuff by Annie Leonard. So you can just search for her on YouTube or go to her website at storyofstuff.com. And watch it and other documentaries, and they're all for free. She explains a lot of what we're talking about in this show and might even be more entertaining for those of our listeners that prefer moving pictures instead of a couple of old bastards sitting around in the studio ranting on.
Speak for yourself.
But by the way, boys, you might be interested to know, I had the chance recently to talk to a couple of lovely, open-minded, forward-thinking and environmentally responsible young girls and a business they've just started here in Bergen, and I just happened to have a tape recorder with me at the time.
What are the odds?
Oh, mate, can you roll the tape for us?
I certainly can.
Hello, girls. My name's Anthony. I'm from Student Radio. What's your name?
My name is Helena.
And your name is?
Cecilia.
And this is the Lille Grønne Frisør Salon, hairdressing salon in Bergen, the only green hairdressing salon. How did you come up with this idea?
We didn't want to get sick.
You didn't want to get sick. That's a really good reason to start up a green hairdressing salon. So can you tell me a little bit about are all of your products ecologically sound products, or tell me a little bit about it?
Yeah, we have some products that are ecological, and we have some products that are organic. They don't have any like chemicals or anything like that in them, and they're all like you can recycle all of the products.
So you're saying the packaging is recyclable?
Yeah, and they're also made in squares, so they can fit more into a package when they send them from overseas or somewhere. Overseas.
Yeah.
They're from Australia, actually.
Oh, they are. They're from Australia. Mr. Paulie, you're going to be very happy to hear that. I can see the packaging here. It's quite unusual because most hairdressing products or shampoos and things, they come in this rounded packaging, but these are square or rectangular. So that means you can fit more into a box. Is that the reason they do it?
Yeah. Definitely.
And what about the actual the product inside the packaging as well?
These are not ecological, but they're organic and they're built up on plants and no chemicals.
What about this mean-looking hairspray up here? Is that as well? Is that organic?
The thing with hairsprays are when you spray it out, it comes lots of gases out. What they've done with this hairspray is that for every bottle they make, they buy like a climate. Do you say climate quote?
Yeah, I think they call it a climate quota or something, or it's like carbon trading or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. So they pay for that, so you can use that hairspray.
Fantastic. Tell me, are these products more expensive than the usual products you'll find in a hairdressing salon?
Yeah, they are quite expensive, but they're in the line with some of like Redken or like something like that.
Okay, so they're not really that more expensive or more expensive than some of the top-of-the-range hairdressing. They definitely are. If you think about the environmental costs of the other ones.
They're the best products I've ever worked with in my whole life.
Is that true for you as well?
Yeah, Kevin Murphy is fantastic.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
love it.
Yeah, I see a lot of Kevin Murphy products here.
Yeah.
Is there any other brands you can tell us about?
Yeah, Maria Åkerberg is she's Swedish.
Okay.
Yeah. They're really good products as well, and they're, what you call ecological. Really good if you have really sensitive skin, or you can't use anything with like that has scent to it, or the other ones don't have perfume in them, but some people react if there's like a mandarin in the bottle or like in the product or something like that, then people that are allergic to mandarins would react to it.
Okay, all right, yeah, so they've thought of everything really, haven't they? But girls, one thing I noticed is a rack of clothing. This is the first rack of clothing I've seen in a hairdressing salon. What's the idea behind this?
Well, we were looking for a charity to support, and we're just like a newly opened hairdresser, so we don't have all the money in the world to give away. So we were thinking of something we could do to raise some money for Colibri, and we figured out that we could sell vintage clothes, because then we can get people to maybe help us bring in clothes they don't want to wear, and they're going to throw out anyway, and we could sell them here and they would go to a good cost.
Exactly, that's a fantastic idea, because do you know what happens to clothes if people just throw them in the garbage bin?
Do they just...
They either go as landfill or they burn them, which causes more pollution.
Yeah.
And so you give a certain amount of the profit to Colibri charity. How much of the profit do you give?
We give 50% to Colibri Children at Risk Foundation.
And what do you do with the other 50%?
The other 50% we use to finance our project. To maybe sometimes we have to buy some clothes to sell them here or second hand, and also maybe one day we want to travel to Brazil where the project is and see for ourselves.
Can you tell us a little bit more about the project and the person behind it?
Yeah, the person behind it, he's called Gregory Smith. He is from the UK, but he's lived in Norway many years, and back in the 90s he was living in Norway, and then he wanted to do something, so he sold everything he had, his house and everything, and traveled to Brazil to help street children. And now he has about 4 centers in the favela outside São Paulo, where children can come and get help. And in one of the centers he's got a hairdressing salon where he have a girl there that trains about 9 girls at the time to become hairdressers. So they have something to take back to the poor place where they come from, and maybe a possibility to start for themselves and earn some money in the good way.
Well, you girls are certainly doing something, a lot here to help not only the environment but our world of over-consumerism, which is what we're going to be talking about in our show today, Occupy Radio. Thank you very much for talking to us, and congratulations on your new hairdressing salon, and we wish you all the best in the future.
Thank you. Thank you.
And thank you, Anthony, for going into, what's it called again? Lille Grønne Frisør, the little green hairdresser.
Yeah.
Up there in near the Fløybahn at... up there in Bergen.
Yeah, it's nice. It's easy to find. And it's nice to know that there's business people out there who are setting an example for others by thinking of more than just their bottom line and profits, and doing something to make the world a better place.
And to reward you, Anthony, with for your good work, I've decided to play a band which is one of your all-time favourites.
All right, but since you're on student radio, they also asked me to mention to all the students out there that they actually do a permanent discount for students as well, 20% off.
Okay, great.
All the time, yeah. So if you're thinking about having a haircut and you want to do something for the environment at the same time, go up to Lille Grønne.
Just opposite the Fløybahn there. Here's a song by Steely Dan, one of Anthony's favourites, and it's from their relatively recent album, as in 10 years ago, and it's called The Last Mall. Dan showing they're still in good form, even though it was 2002 or 3. But The Last More was the song, and that was for Anthony, because he's a big fan.
Thanks, mate. Big fan of Steely Dan.
Good fan of
That rhymed.
Yeah, it did. And, Last Mall. The last chance
Mall,
to shop
yes.
at the Last Mall.
One of your good choices to
Thank
fit
you.
the show. The show about consumerism that we've been talking about today, Mr. Pauly.
Should I just mention that Steely Dan actually is named after a vibrator?
I bet people didn't know that.
No, well, now they do. Anyway, sorry. Back to consumerism, and sorry
Look
about
at Runa's face just lit up
just
like
went-
a Christmas tree then.
I think he went all shy on us. Anyway, so
Anyway,
back to
consumerism,
Yes,
and
me.
I guess we're again promoting cultural change, Runa, aren't we? But let's go back a little. We were talking about the consumer side of a transaction. What about the seller side?
Yeah, I guess many of our listeners are pretty much aware of bad sides to business. But, not all business are the same. But in this show, we've been criticizing big business, something which should be considered synonymous with the corporations. And I don't know if you've seen this documentary, The Corporation, from 2003. It's based on a book that goes by the same name, written by Joel Bakan. Now, the theme of the book and the documentary is that corporations have evolved to become the fabric of economic society, but that they, as lawful entities, are given freedom to wreak havoc on the world without proper accountability.
Yeah, I've seen that documentary, and I highly recommend our listeners to watch it. I remember he compares a corporation to a person and finds that the corporate personality is that of a psychopath that doesn't have empathy. It's only concerned with advancing its own goals. It doesn't have human traits like morality and so on. And there's plenty of small and medium-sized businesses that don't fall into this category, though. What I hear is a lot, actually, is that business needs more freedom and not just stifling regulations.
Yeah, there is a huge distinction between small and local business to nationwide or transnational corporate business, which we are talking about. The latter is the milking cow of shareholders and are the basis of a capital accumulation, which is, as we've said before, is the building block of any economy in the world as it is today. And this trend from small and medium-sized to transnational corporate has been shifting for a while, but in the last 20 or 30 years, corporate sizes has been rising to the point of the absolute absurd. Just to give you a number, of the world's 100 largest economies, 51 are corporations and 49 are countries.
Wait, hang on a minute. Did I hear that right? Just for our listeners, I should repeat this, or you should repeat this. Did you say that of the world's 100 largest economies, 51 are corporations and 49 are countries?
But wait, there's more. There are roughly 43,000 transnational corporations. And among those are a core of 1,300 companies with interlocking ownership that controls 60% of the world's revenues. And 140 of these 1,300, they are called super entities and control nearly half of what those 60% is about.
It represents, yeah.
So if people are interested in this, they should just follow the link in the script and check the sources for themselves.
So this means there's a massive concentration of power in the top corporate offices around the world, run by their own boards and with their own financial self-interest.
Yes, but we need to remember that corporations couldn't exist without the blessing of governments, and the historic ties goes back to the two East India companies that made a literal killing by exploiting weaker countries with the blessing of the Dutch and British governments. So these corporations, they were both founded around 1600 and functioned for almost 200 years as the extended arms of their sovereign counterparts in promoting colonial exploitation of goods, slaves, and services. And the British East India Company was dissolved by appropriation of its organization, its wealth, and private military, which effectively meant that the British government no longer outsourced its colonial rule in India.
Yeah, I remember learning about the East India Companies in
school.
In school, we had to learn about that because it's kind of not far from Australia. And but we learned a different version. I didn't know any of this stuff. It's like the version we learnt made the British and Dutch East India Companies out to be the economic heroes.
I guess we were indoctrinated, like most other people at school.
Yeah.
Is it as bad as? Is it nearly as bad today, you think?
I would be hard-pressed not to say yes, but I can't. Let me just go to a character from the time before the Second World War. His name is Smedley Darlington Butler, and he published a booklet in 1935 named War is a Racket, which was based on his speeches which he held around the U.S. And I have a quote from one of his speeches, if I may.
Yeah, go for it.
War is just a racket. A racket is best described, I believe, as something that is not what it seems to the majority of people. Only a small inside group knows what it is about. It is conducted for the benefit of the very few at the expense of the masses. I believe in adequate defense at the coastline and nothing else. If a nation comes over here to fight, then we'll fight. The trouble with America is that when the dollar only earns 6% over here, then it gets restless and goes overseas to get 100%. Then the flag follows the dollar and the soldiers follow the flag. I wouldn't go to war again, as I have done, to protect some lousy investment of the bankers. There are only two things we should fight for. One is the defense of our homes and the other is the Bill of Rights. War for any other reason is simply a racket. There isn't a trick in the racketeering bag that the military gang is blind to. It has its fingermen to point out enemies, its musclemen to destroy enemies, its brainmen to plan war preparations, and a big boss super-nationalistic capitalism. It may seem odd for me, a military man, to adopt such a comparison. Truthfulness compels me to. I spent 33 years and 4 months in active military service as a member of this country's most agile military force, the Marine Corps. I served in all commissioned ranks from second lieutenant to major general, and during that period I spent most of my time being a high-class muscleman for big business, for Wall Street and for the bankers. In short, I was a racketeer, a gangster for capitalism. I suspected I was just part of a racket at the time. Now I am sure of it. Like all the members of the military profession, I never had a thought of my own until I left the service. My mental faculties remained in suspended animation while I obeyed the orders of higher-ups. This is typical with everyone in the military service. I helped make Mexico, especially Tampico, safe for American oil interest in 1914. I helped make Haiti and Cuba a decent place for the National City Bank boys to collect revenues in. I helped in the raping of half a dozen Central American republics for the benefits of Wall Street. The record of racketeering is long. I helped purify Nicaragua for the International Banking House of Brown Brothers in 1909 to 1912. I brought light to the Dominican Republic for American sugar interest in 1916. In China, I helped to see to it that Standard Oil went its way unmolested. During those years, I had, as the boys in the back room would say, a swell racket. Looking back on it, I feel that I could have given Al Capone a few hints. The best he could do was to operate his racket in 3 districts. I operated on 3 continents.
Wow, they're quite intense words of, quite chilling words of let's say, self-realization and retrospective analysis there from General Smedley Butler. I wonder how it was received at the time.
It was very popular.
Yeah.
But, you know, a lot of people didn't like what he was doing.
Rocking the boat, of course. Yeah. I've got a small diversion here. Just, of course, Christmas is coming up. It's that time of the year.
Diversions are good.
Yeah, well, now we're getting towards late November, and it's always that time when people, especially here in the dark north, start thinking and start planning for Christmas. And this is the ultimate time of needless consumption, I think. I mean, there's a few, I guess you would think about Easter eggs at Easter, but especially Valentine's Day. And
you don't spend anywhere near as much money at Easter as what you do at Christmas.
No, that's right, yeah. And Valentine's Day is ridiculous as well, and even Halloween's becoming, you know, just a bit of a circus.
Yeah.
But nobody has expressed this consumerist frenzy as well as the great comedian and songwriter Tom Lehrer from I think it was for the 60s. This is worth listening to.
One very familiar type of song is the Christmas carol, although it is perhaps a bit out of season at this time. However, I am informed by my disc jockey friends, of whom I have none, that in order to get a song popular by Christmas time, you have to start plugging it well in advance. So here goes. It's always seemed to me, after all, that Christmas, with its spirit of giving, offers us all a wonderful opportunity each year to reflect on what we all most sincerely and deeply believe in. I refer, of course, to money. And yet none of the Christmas carols that you hear on the radio or in the street even attempts to capture the true spirit of Christmas as we celebrate it in the United States. That is to say, the commercial spirit. So I should like to offer the following Christmas carol for next year as being perhaps a bit more appropriate. Christmas time is here, by golly, disapproval would be folly. Deck the halls with hunks of holly, fill the cup and don't say when. Kill the turkeys, ducks, and chickens, mix the punch, drag out the dickens. Even though the prospect sickens, brother, here we go again. On Christmas Day you can't get sore, your fellow man you must adore. There's time to rob him all the more, the other 360 of war. Relations sparing no expense'll send some useless old utensil, or a matching pen and pencil, just the thing I need. How nice. It doesn't matter how sincere it is, nor how heartfelt the spirit. Sentiment will not endear it. What's important is the price. Hark the Herald Tribune sings, advertising wondrous things. God rest ye merry merchants, may ye make the Yuletide pay. Angels we have heard on high tell us to go out and buy. So let the raucous sleigh bells jingle, hail our dear old friend Kris Kringle, driving his reindeer across the sky. Don't stand underneath when they fly by. Actually, I did rather well myself this past Christmas. The nicest present I received was a gift certificate, good at any hospital, for a lobotomy. Rather thoughtful. Now,
and that was A Christmas Carol by Tom Lehrer. You're on Student Radio in Bergen, listening to Occupy Radio. Remember, you can download our podcast on our Facebook group, which is called Occupy Radio Norway. And our YouTube channel, which is called Occupy Radio Norway. We're pretty inventive, aren't we? Anyway, before that funny little song, we'd been talking about international racketeering, and I hadn't heard of Smedley Darlington Butler before you mentioned him, Runa, but it seems he was a hero of the American Marine Corps, twice decorated with the Congressional Medal of Honor. and appointed Major General after extensive service. It speaks volumes that he suddenly realised what he's been doing and then goes on a tour of America to make speeches and the unsavoury connection between big business and military involvement.
Indeed, it does. And his story also involves a juicy tale of a planned military coup in the U.S., one in which President Roosevelt was to be kept as a symbolic figure, but where the real governance would be with the military and corporate leaders.
I thought that's the way it was anyway.
Yeah, but this is way beyond the system where we have today.
Yeah.
But this is a true story, isn't actually known, since we only have his record of it. But we know that what he talks about, it seems very true, and that is that the geostrategic concerns coincides with corporate interests.
For those of our listeners who haven't followed the episode, you can find more reference, actually, to geostrategic concerns in our show number 7. It's called War, as I mentioned before, on YouTube and the Facebook group. Do we have more recent examples of this, Runa?
Yeah, I think we have lots of them. But let me bring in another testimony from an insider, and his name is John Perkins, a former employee of an intelligence agency in the U.S. called the National Security Agency. And in 2004, he published a book called Confessions of an Economic Hitman. It became hugely popular and tells the tale of how he became a low-profile spokesperson for U.S. economic and geostrategic interest. And his mode of operations would be to speak directly to heads of state, tell them to accept loans or aid with certain conditions, and make sure that those countries would become economically dependent and subservient to the machinations of business interest and controlled policies. So the consequences of not accepting this offer, it would come in the form of rebellion, assassination, or embargoes. But again, his accounts aren't backed by proper evidence that we can find, but there are plenty of circumstantial evidence that make his claims probable.
So it's almost mafia-like. It's like a mobster. He would be the guy that sells protection to the local store, which never had any incidents before. But why do we bring this up if it belongs in the category of conspiracies?
Yeah, that's a very good question. But the thing is, we know that there are things going on which highly suggest that weaker countries are being manipulated at many levels to accept exploitation and rotten business deals. And what is happening in Europe right now with the austerity packages isn't just about fiscal responsibility. It is just as much a question of wholesale of public assets and large-scale privatization of public services. And how far this can actually go is illustrated by the Bolivian water wars of 2000.
Yeah, I've heard about that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you know, the loss of cocaine revenues, it crippled the Bolivian economy and forced them to receive World Bank loans under IMF supervision. And this in turn meant that they had to privatize nearly all of their public assets. And the last one to go was the waterworks. But it didn't just include what had been publicly built. It also included what people had privately built of wells. And to top it all off, they put legislation to prohibit unlicensed collection of rainwater.
It's obscene. I'd certainly consider rebellion if a collection of rainwater became illegal, here or...
Yeah. Me too. Me too.
Especially here. Yeah, the larger picture isn't. It's supposed to be that corporations, being the best at what they can do, are creating business, which means jobs and taxes, Runa.
Yeah, the common held belief is that everyone wins if corporations make good business. However, to create profit, there needs to be a difference between cost of production and sales price. And that difference very often means including something what economists call externalities.
Right. Explain that one.
It means whatever costs or benefits that are not incurred in the actual calculation of cost or sales price.
Right.
For example, the cost of oil is primarily calculated from, extraction, transportation, refining, but the externality cost is toxic waste seeping into groundwater, the contamination of fertile soil, creating CO2 and general degradation of living conditions. So, for instance, the local tribes living in the Niger Delta, they have been paying a huge cost for foreign extraction of oil in their habitat. And it never shows up on the balance sheets and is considered an external cost. Hence the term externalities.
And that's been going on for years. I wonder how much the oil companies would actually pay in reparations if they were ever to be charged with righting their wrongs.
Yeah, that is a good question. But the thing about externality isn't just that it's wrong. It is a necessary fundament for business in the economic structure of today. Low wages, poverty, social distress is also an externality, and it needs to be there. If your cell phone, the true cost of your cell phone, it depends on the low wages paid to those who mine minerals with their bare hands in Congo at the end of a gun muzzle.
Yeah.
Or like the sweatshop workers at Foxconn
in China, yeah.
Yeah, they find their situation so bad that they jump off rooftops. So if externalities were to be included in the price differences would disappear, and there would be no profits to be made. So progress in the eyes of your economist, it would come to a grinding halt.
So this means we can't stop poverty?
If we decide to keep this economic system, it's hard to imagine. But if we decide to change to a different system, I'm pretty sure that we can find a way to not be obsessed with profit, but instead chase goals of accomplishment and exploration. So if we look at the problems we've covered in our show so far, many people talk of how technical inventions perhaps can solve all of our needs. But the concept of externalities, it tells us that this the change is one of society. It's society that needs to change, and our ideas of how society can function on a day-to-day basis needs to change, and the values that govern our institutions needs to change.
Yeah, well, speaking of change, let's change the ambience a little bit, but still on the same theme, of course, of rampant consumerism. Here's an old favourite of most of ours, the great parodier, Weird Al Yankovic, with a parody. Maybe I can ask you what the song is after, and you might be able to get it, Anthony. And even the band. Yes, 2 points.
Yeah. A used pink bathrobe, a rare mint snow globe, a Smurf TV tray I bought on eBay. My house is filled with this crap.
That was, of course, Weird Al Yankovic with eBay. Parody of what, Anthony?
Parody of, that'd have to be one of those,
if you know it,
90s boy bands.
Yeah, it was. it's not Robbie Williams one, it's the other one, the Backstreet Boys.
Backdoor Boys.
Backstreet
Boys.
Backstreet Boys, I want you that way.
I want it that way.
I want it that way, yeah.
Like that. Yeah.
Yes, thanks for that, Paulie. Back to the drawing board. Now, I reckon it's we're going to have to find new fundamentals and make the paradigm shift happen, Runa.
Mm-hmm.
We did mention local business early. Perhaps we should go further into that, doing it locally.
Yeah, picking up on where we talked about collaborative consumption.
Correct.
The need for smarter ways of consumption is absolutely necessary, especially if we are to avoid the scenario where climate change creates an uninhabitable planet. So what we're advocating here isn't that people consume less or that the majority of the Western world needs to lower the standard of living. What we're actually advocating is less production, less extraction of resources, less transportation and less waste, and most importantly, smarter ways of consumption.
And is this reminiscent of older times when people had to just make do with what they had?
Yeah, that's also part of the solution. The age of craftsmanship has almost died out, but it could easily be revived and can provide jobs that are locally needed.
It promotes creativity, really, though, I reckon. It would promote creativity.
Yeah.
Promotes happiness.
Yeah.
But does this mean all the factories are going to go out of business?
No, not necessarily. But they will need to adapt, just like everyone else.
Mm-hmm.
Product design will have to be centered on the idea that parts can be replaced or fixed with locally available tools and facilities. And factories that are able to embrace such ideas can focus on parts and not on assembly. And they could actually even outsource assembly to local facilities so people can go online, customize their product, and have it assembled and ready for delivery at their local craftsman.
Or maybe they could start developing goods that last forever or as long as possible, like the light bulb, for example, which we know actually can be made to last forever. But in theory, it sounds easy, but wouldn't this just become a redistribution of problems associated with today's manufacturing?
If we just give up on the ideas of hierarchical and centralized organization, I think we can avoid that. Local assembly could just as well be, local disassembly and materials salvaging. And, the use of plastic, it's a design and cost issue and can be replaced by a number of different material choices. Besides, we also need to consider that local facilities can also profit from the use of 3D printing. Complex shape that usually were just created in these specialized factories. They can be distributed digitally and created when and where it is needed. But again, this isn't about the technology or the techniques. They are just there to make it possible to choose a different path.
Yeah.
Because you see, ordinary manufacturing is about creating a minimum of stock and selling it at a certain price.
Yeah.
So if demand for your product suddenly falls, you need to advertise to make that demand.
Yeah.
While in the localized scenario, the manufacturing is about supplying demands without the need for creating the demand itself.
Yeah.
It's about taking care of what you have, but also salvaging the resources of what is broken and what is not needed anymore.
So it's about self-sufficiency and less trade, I guess.
Self-sufficiency, yes. And this makes great sense from the perspective of a resilient society. Equipping your local communities to withstand resource shortages and factory destruction or economic downturns, problems with employment and natural disasters. It's a huge bonus to the lives of everyone in such communities. And I can't go into every one of these to explain why, but if we consider like natural disasters, it is usually not the calamity itself that kills most people. It is the loss of infrastructure and equipment afterwards that put people at risk. So in a large-scale scenario, the greater society, it uses a lot of time to get out and make enough stuff to deal with and it means that just many people go without help for longer periods of time, while a local community that can fix its equipment and make solutions for infrastructure is much more likely to save its inhabitants. And why our societies aren't shaped in this way is largely due to faulty thinking, I believe.
So you want to say something about less trade too?
Yeah, I forgot that one. Yes and no. I don't believe there will be less trade in a localized society. If we look at how the Italian Renaissance city-states, they flourished in such an environment, and I don't see why it needs to be different in our time. And we need to remember that many of these family businesses in Italy, they survived up to our days. And are still going. And I believe there will be more invention and greater exchange of ideas in a localized society. Today, a lot of great ideas are hidden in corporate laboratories or monopolized through poorly administered patents. If corporate greed is out of the picture, then perhaps those great ideas could flourish and develop in a world where experimentation and collaboration could happen in between a multitude of localized testing grounds.
Yes, some interesting thoughts and ideas once again, Rune, and again, like in many of our shows and other commentators who we've spoken about in the show, we've come back to this thing of localising in many different respects. I hope you've sown some seeds amongst our listeners as well. I think it's time to go to a song, Mr. Paulie.
Yeah, and speaking of localising, we have a local band.
Oh, we do?
Yeah, a local band from Bergen called Blood Command, singing a cover by Fugazi, and again, appropriately titled Merchandise. Blood Command there with Merchandise, the Fugazi cover. And now we have... It's Vegard in Trondheim. Are you in Trondheim, Vegard?
Yes, I am.
Are you? Is it cold up there again?
Yeah, I had to crank up the heat in my radiators just about now, so a bit cold.
Okay.
Yep.
Well, nice to hear your voice, and we're going to hear you ranting away, trumpeting away. What have you got for us this week, mate?
Well, one of the old mantras of free market economics is the law of supply and demand. The idea is that in a competitive market, the price of a good or service will settle at a point where the demand from consumers meets the supply from producers. This so-called law, which makes it sound as if prices magically rise and fall all on their own, represents a view of market economics that is naive at best, and some would even call it a myth. Prices go up and down because they are regulated. Producers regulate production and prices to maximize their profits. Profit is just about all a corporation as a personified entity cares about. As Anthony mentioned earlier, on analysis, corporations seem to have the personality of a psychopath. Some might argue that corporations also do a lot of good. In later years, the term CSR, or corporate social responsibility, has become more and more common. This is the nice idea that corporations should support local communities and governments in countries where they operate. But a quick Google search for Niger Delta oil, deliberate toxic spill, or an image search for tar sands implies, at least to me, that even if those behind the idea had good intentions, CSR has become just another result of cost-benefit analysis. If a corporation does something that looks like a good thing, chances are they're expecting rising profits or fearing falling profits. Corporations do just about anything for profits, including whatever they can to make people buy their products, giving another blow to the magical law of supply and demand. In 1932, a guy called Bernard London made a pamphlet entitled "Ending the Depression Through Planned Obsolescence." To stimulate consumption and hence the economy, he suggested a legal limit for how long consumers could own a product before they had to replace it. This seemingly absurd idea never made law, but it's been widely adopted as a business strategy by producers, indirectly through the use of inferior materials or cheaper and less precise production equipment, directly through things like backward incompatibility. The battery for your power drill just happens to go out of production as the new model comes out, and covertly through fashion or constantly pushing out new and better models. An acknowledgement of all three is the estimated total sale of mobile phones in the world in 2012. According to the market research company IDC, it will stop at no less than 1.8 billion units. Even if some of the replaced phones are recycled or even reused, a lot of both precious and heavy metals from mobile phones end up in landfills. It shouldn't be news to people that we live on a finite planet with finite resources, at least in terms of material resources, so mindless consumption like this should be regarded as absolutely irrational. But talking about mindlessness and irrationality, we come to another aspect of the manufacturing of demand, marketing. Marketing and PR in modern times was pioneered by Sigmund Freud's nephew, Edward Bernays. Bernays used his uncle's methods of psychoanalysis to market products by making them resonate with unconscious desires, rather than focusing on their utility. If you analyze an ad for something, you often get little relevant information about the properties or functions of the product. What you usually get is an image of the product as representing a certain lifestyle or a certain social status. Responding to this image, discovering that the product doesn't live up to the promises from the ad can be a disappointment. But worse, research shows that release of dopamine in the brain from anticipating a reward increases the more uncertain the reward is. The implication being that experiencing how stuff doesn't bring happiness, social status, or a particular lifestyle might actually increase the craving for more stuff. Reinforced by the hypnotic power of TV, which I touched on in the previous show, the corporate machine, ever hungry for more profit, is threatening to destroy our planet as well as our well-being and sense of self, and it must be stopped. But how? And here comes the good news. What we have been talking about, bridging our differences, building community, and rediscovering ourselves and the world around us, will not only stop this monster, but provide us with a sense of meaning and happiness that all the products in the world could ever dream of providing.
Well, thank you very much, Vegard, for blowing your trumpet. A little question to you. How many old mobile phones can you find in your place?
None.
I've got about
but
4.
I've owned like 3 before this one, I think.
I've got about 4. I'm wondering what to do with them.
Yeah. You should definitely hand them in for recycling.
Okay.
Yeah, they can get a lot of good stuff out of them.
Yeah, there are certain recycling practices. I think something like 15% of, or something like that, of mobile phones are recycled.
Yeah.
And they take out all the precious metals and gold and silver and different things.
Yeah. Nice to finish on a positive note there as well, Vegard. Bridging, do you think it's going in the right direction, albeit slowly?
Yeah, we see more and more indications of that. And just in the last few days, I've seen several articles on the most prominent business newspaper in Norway, Dagens Næringsliv, Business Today, they have written about global warming, and that the World Bank has come with a new report saying that we have to act now and we can't wait anymore. And I've seen several articles about the same issues in the past week or something. Among other, the view that we can only take out a third of the oil that we are currently planning to take out, if we are gonna not exceed the 2-degree limit or the 2-degree goal. So it seems like maybe it's creeping into the mainstream
media at last. They're realising.
Yeah, and it's not too early.
No, not before time. Thank you very much, Vegard. We'll speak to you next week.
You're very welcome.
And to reward you, we've got one of your favourite songs by The Hives.
Yeah, thanks.
See you later, mate. Bye.
Yeah, see you. Bye.
Bye.
My boss, he's a proper bubble. Put me as a Nissan scrubber bubble. Do it right, receive the lion's share, please. No, I'll do what you say the Russian is. Supply and demand, supply and demand, supply and demand.
Swedish band The Hives there with Supply and Demand. And now it's time for...
Science and Tech. Breakthrough of the Week.
Today it's all about energy, Mr. Pauly. Geothermal energy, which we've spoken about in our show on energy, if you want to go back and check it out on YouTube or Facebook. And the headline is geothermal energy becoming a reality?
It is in some places, though, isn't it? In Iceland?
Yeah, but it's the technological breakthrough that we're talking about here. Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Bigger and better breakthroughs, making it more accessible. We have talked about the need to shift away from dirty, polluting fossil fuels, and we've seen little innovation in geothermal power. A clean, sustainable, long-term source of energy. And seeing as there's so much money to be earned in the dirty ones, nothing ever seems to happen. So it's fantastic to see a company giving it a go. The Newberry Enhanced Geothermal Systems, EGS, demonstration project is in the process of creating a new geothermal reservoir in central Oregon in the United States. The core of the new reservoir is a 2-mile or 3.2 kilometre deep well drilled about 6.5 kilometres from the centre of Newberry volcano. The rock surrounding the well bore reaches temperatures in the order of 600 degrees Fahrenheit, that's 315 degrees Celsius, and nearly impermeable to water, but that is about to change. The goal of EGS is to produce electricity by extracting energy from the Earth's heat. To accomplish this, a subsurface system of fractures is formed in hot, impermeable rock, and water is pumped down from the surface, and it's circulated through the fractures and returned to the surface as an energy source through a geothermal power plant. What do you reckon?
I reckon there'd be quite a lot of gases coming out of that one.
There will be, yeah. Yeah, but we've just got to get used to more gas, Mr. Pauly. We do. And sacrifice for geothermal power.
It's just a sacrifice. No, it seems like let's hope. We can only hope.
Yeah, we can. Hopefully it won't go under. But more in sustainable energy, wind and solar-powered freight ships. We're talking these massive, massive freight ships, of which many are owned by Norwegian companies. And in the 400 years or so leading up to the adoption of steam power in the 19th century, sailing ships ruled the waves, as we all know. Yeah. But in an effort to cut increasing fuel costs and also reduce emissions, sails are set once again to prove their worth, Runa and Mr. Pauly. But unlike other sails, Japan-based company Eco Marine Power, EMP, is developing sails with an even more modern twist. Rather than just harnessing the power of the wind, EMP's energy sail can be fitted with solar panels to also harness solar power. The energy sail is a rigid take on the sail that sits upon a pole and automatically rotates to take full advantage of the wind and help propel the vessel. At the same time, solar panels embedded in the sail harness energy from the sun to provide electrical power to reduce the amount of fuel used by the auxiliary generators. So in bad weather or when the ship is at anchor, the sails can be lowered and stored. But the solar panels can also be used while the ship is in port, with energy stored in battery modules, providing the potential for totally emissions-free operations while not at sea.
that would be very welcome here in Bergen, where all these cruise ships come in, and they
in the summertime, all that
and
pollution.
they just keep pumping it out.
They're sitting there with just bloody smoke coming out of their chimneys.
They're the largest buildings in Bergen as well. You look at them, and it's like they're many stories high, much higher than any other building, and they're producing all that waste. Thank you, Anthony, as usual.
No worries.
With your wonderful science and tech breakthroughs. And I believe that we have come to the end of our show.
We have, sad as it is, but it's been lovely. And your impeccable taste in music and Runa's research again. I've learnt a lot today, Runes.
Oh, that's good.
And your charm, Anthony. It all comes down to that, really, doesn't it?
Thank you, yes.
And we'll be back next week on Occupy Radio with some more ways of hopefully making this world a better place for us all. Goodbye, boys.
Goodbye.
And girls.